All right, let's talk about the book of Revelation. It's this incredible book, just packed with these intense images, symbols, and a timeline of events that people have been trying to figure out for centuries. Today, we're going to jump right into one of its most fascinating puzzles.
So deep in the later chapters, there's this really interesting mystery. We get introduced to two groups of four angels. One group shows up in chapter 7, and a totally different sounding group appears in chapter 9. So the big question, the one we're digging into today, is, are they the same angels, or are we talking about two completely separate groups?
I mean, when you just look at the descriptions, they seem like night and day, right? The chapter 7 angels, their whole job is to hold back the four winds, to stop them from wrecking the earth and the sea. They're basically on damage control, for now. But then you flip to chapter 9, and you've got these four angels who are bound at the Euphrates River. And when they're let loose, it's not about winds. It's about unleashing death on just a staggering scale.
Okay, so you might be thinking 4 angels, 8 angels, who cares? Why does this even matter? Well, it actually matters a lot. See, the answer to this question completely changes how you map out the end times timeline. It's like a domino effect. One interpretation sends the sequence of events in one direction, and the other sends it somewhere else entirely. So figuring this out is kind of key.
All right, let's dive into the first argument. This is the one that says, yep, they're the same angels.
So the key to this whole argument isn't really the angels themselves, it's the winds. This viewpoint says the winds aren't literal. They're a symbol for chaos, for the turmoil that stirs up nations and empires. The kind of political unrest that allows those big, scary beasts, those symbolic world powers, to rise up.
And this isn't just a random idea. It actually comes straight from the Old Testament. If you look at the book of Daniel, it's spelled out pretty clearly. The four winds stir up the great sea, which is a classic symbol for all the world's nations. And out of that chaos come four great beasts, these massive empires.
So you see the logic here, right? It goes like this. In Daniel, winds lead to beasts. In Revelation 9, the angels' actions also lead to beasts rising. Therefore, the winds being held back in Revelation 7 must be that same symbolic force. So the conclusion for this argument is simple. It's one group of angels with one job, to control the political chaos that brings these final world powers onto the stage.
But wait, that's only one side of the story. There's a whole other way to look at this, and it's pretty powerful. This is the second argument, and it says, no way. These are definitely two different groups of angels. And this viewpoint totally changes the game. It says, forget the symbolism of the winds for a second. Just look at the effects. What actually happens? And when you compare the results of their actions, the differences are, well, they're huge.
Okay, look at this. The chapter 7 angels unleash winds, and what gets hit? The literal physical planet. The earth, the sea, the trees, a third of nature gets wiped out. But the chapter 9 angels? They aren't targeting nature. They are released to go after people, and a third of all humanity is killed. See the difference? One is a massive environmental catastrophe, the other is a global slaughter. And the Bible is so specific about this. It says the angels at the Euphrates were prepared for the exact hour, day, month, and year. Their mission was crystal clear and terrifyingly precise. Kill a third of mankind. I mean, that's a world away from just holding back some winds, right? And here's the clincher for this argument, the timing. It's totally possible for the winds of chapter 7 to be blowing, for that environmental destruction to be happening while the other four angels are still bound at the Euphrates. The events don't have to happen at the same time. In fact, this view says they are two totally separate judgments that happen one after the other.
So if they are two different groups, what does that do to the timeline? Well, this is where things get really interesting. Suddenly, the whole sequence of events starts to line up and make a lot more sense.
Okay, so check this out. It starts with the sixth seal, and the 144,000 are sealed, basically marked for protection. Then the seventh seal opens, and that kicks off the 7 trumpet judgments. And it's during these first trumpets that the winds are let go, wrecking a third of the planet. It's only later when the 6th trumpet sounds that the second group, the Euphrates angels, are released, and that massive army kills a third of mankind. And the beasts, the political powers, they only rise up after all that destruction. You see that? It's not one big mess. It's a step-by-step escalation of judgment.
So we've looked at both sides. Where does that leave us? What's the final verdict here?
Well, the conclusion is pretty clear-cut. The angels holding the winds in chapter 7 and the angels bound at the Euphrates in chapter 9, they're not the same. They are two totally different groups with two very different jobs at two different moments in the timeline.
And it all really boils down to one thing: how you read the words land and sea. For the same angel's argument to work, you have to see land and sea as a symbol for nations in both chapters. But for the different angel's argument, which is where the evidence seems to point, you see a crucial difference. In chapter 7, it's talking about the literal planet, the dirt, the water. The symbolic chaos among nations comes later, after the judgment of chapter 9.
And that leaves us with a pretty powerful thought, doesn't it? If these really are two separate escalating events, first a judgment on nature and then a judgment on humanity, what does that tell us? It suggests the end times aren't just one big, sudden event, but a series of stages, each one more intense than the last. It's like a puzzle where, as you put the pieces in the right order, the bigger and, frankly, more sobering picture starts to come into focus.